to be number three. And in an industry where in 10 years, we took a company from 85 million a year in revenue to 1.44 billion. And so huge from a growth perspective. My leadership styles changed a whole lot, but creativity really came in there. And like, it wasn't from me being authoritative. The creativity came where I had an idea and I acknowledged that I didn't know enough about it. And so I started getting other ideas. And then after a couple of these things happened, people would come to me and go, I have this idea, but I don't know what to do with it. Is it a good idea or a bad idea?
Hello, welcome to Creativity Boost Podcast. Today, I'm super excited because I have the opportunity and the privilege to bring before you someone who has blazed the trail in different industries as far as business is concerned. He's a man that has raised businesses from ground up to over $500 million in revenue. He's a man who is passionate about servant leadership. And it's my pleasure today to introduce to you Kurt Uhlir. Hello, Kurt. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me.
Wow. I'm super excited to finally get the chance to speak with you today and have this conversation because you have such a very loaded track record as far as leadership is concerned, and particularly because of the topic we're going to be talking about today, which is how to lead with creativity. Now, Kurt, can you tell me about your experience and your journey in leadership and business and what you think about creativity and the interplay with leadership?
Oh, that is a big question. So I'm going to try not to speak for like 45 minutes.
Okay.
So I have a varied background with leadership. I did start businesses very early. I had formed 2 LLCs when I was 14 because of taxes, and I was hiring so many people. But I even then, though, I kind of went through the first maybe 10, almost 15 years as an authoritative leader. And so I was really successful with that, and we may talk about that difference some. But during that kind of transition, I found my way after my master's program into a company called Navtech. It became Here Technologies. Most everybody listening has used either Mapbox or Google Maps or Waze somewhere. This company is larger than all of those, and kind of was the data behind all the car navigation systems. And so I was at this linchpin of within the company of rising to be number 3, and in an industry where in 10 years we took a company from 85 million a year in revenue to 1.44 billion. And so huge from a growth perspective. My leadership styles changed a whole lot, but creativity really came in there. I was always an operations person until I came there, and I had an idea. And because of my position, I could literally walk into our CEO, who was the former CFO at Disney. He ran Disney theme parks. He was the president there. And I said, hey, Judson, I have this crazy idea that I could think could make us $1 billion. What do I do? And he did what I didn't know at the time, but a lot of leaders do. He went, hey, I have this department code. I want you to run at it. Here's a big budget. Nobody will know whatever you build as department code. Go work on it for 12 to 18 months. And that crazy idea happened to be very successful. And so he kept giving me permission to do that while I had my day job. And so by the time I ended up leaving that company, I don't know, I probably had put in like 50 invention disclosure statements. They had more than a dozen patent applications filed that ended up getting granted. And we literally started some new industries with some of that. And like, it wasn't from me being authoritative. The creativity came where I had an idea and I acknowledged that I didn't know enough about it. And so I started getting other ideas. And then after a couple of these things happened, people would come to me and go, I have this idea, but I don't know what to do with it. Is it a good idea or a bad idea? I've heard you can do something with that. And so I realized, hey, I'm not the smartest person in the room. You're not the smartest person in the room, but together we can probably come up with something that's cool.
Wow, that's awesome. Just to hear the testimony of what you were able to accomplish with the twist of creativity in the mix, it's really, really inspiring. So how did you develop your leadership skills? And do you think, because as far as I know, I've rarely heard people who speak on leadership talk about creativity. They talk about almost every other thing that is relevant to leadership apart from creativity. So it was not until recent times that it hit me and like, wow, even leaders need creativity. As a matter of fact, leaders of nations, they need to work on their creativity if they want their nations to succeed. And this is why many nations fail. This is one of the major reasons why many nations fail. They don't know how to solve problems. They don't know how to create solutions to problems, because I feel that's the essence of leadership generally. So what's your take on that?
I think historically, I mean, even if we go back thousands of years, much of leadership has been broken. There's been this push that just happens from culture, or you get these books and then people that were successful. It's like nothing to denigrate, say, Mark Zuckerberg. And I have no idea what his actual leadership style is. But having been inside the halls of Facebook and owned that relationship with my company of mine and theirs, like at that time, he had 5 people working full time on his PR and branding for him. So it's like, whatever we believe we know about Mark Zuckerberg, we don't know who's really him. Like maybe an Elon Musk who just like will pop out his phone and tweet, but it's like, there's this view that's been created. If you even go back in history, it was very rare for leaders to not feel like they had to make all the decisions or that they had to be involved in everything. And it was actually much more rare to have people that acknowledged, I don't know all the things. And so this stoicism is built up, especially like to your point at government, that says most people feel like they need to be the one that come up with the answers.
Yeah.
And because of that, like, even the nicest ones, they may want their teams to be creative, but they've created environments where they say they want creativity, but they're definitely not fostering it for sure.
Absolutely, because I've seen a lot of leaders misconstrue the essence of leadership. For me, I think that leadership is, influencing people towards a goal, towards a vision, by inspiring them to solve a problem that will lead them towards achieving that goal. And the way to do that is by helping these people discover their own creativity, discover their own problem-solving skills in their own domain and department, so that collectively the collective group of people, the team, the subjects or followers or whatever you want to call it, collectively, when they all deploy their problem-solving skills, they can now achieve the shared vision. But what I see in recent times and even in past times is that there's a leader and everybody is looking to the leader to tell them what to do or to give them, the answers, the blueprint to their domain's problems. So how do you think we can change that narrative in our current world?
For me, let's even step back. I'll answer that for sure. I'm going to answer it by actually defining how I view leadership as well. I would agree with you on leadership. A lot of what people, I think, what comes into what the wider world calls leadership actually isn't leadership. It's management or dictatorship, even if they're a nice dictator. But I mean, but using what leadership is, if you're the CEO or the boss, you're the leader in Western world. And so for me, I think it gets complicated too much in that term where people for me, leadership is somebody is either an authoritative leader, which at the end of the day, even if that's a nice person, an authoritative leader is do what I say, do it how I say, usually in the time frame I say it, or there's the door, you're fired. And they can be the nicest person, but that's what's underlying that. The other side is servant leadership to me. And it's less than 1% of leaders. And that's the leader, which is the type of person you described. It's the person that, to me, walks in the door every day and says, whether I have 1 employee or 5,000 employees like I had, it says, look, I have hired you, Amanda, to help the company reach an outcome. After that decision, I realize there's multiple things that happen. One, you're going to make decisions, even if you're a factory worker, that I'm not aware of. And I've hired you to do things. And so my job after I've hired you is to serve you, to help you, Amanda, or whoever this person is, accomplish the business outcomes I would like them to accomplish as quickly and as fast as possible. At that point, I've hired her for a job. I'm telling her, but if I take the time and explain the outcomes I'm expecting from that job, and I'm then usually giving I'm a huge SOP person. I was on the phone with a company today, and in the course of 30 seconds, I was like, I have 3 SOPs for each of these things we just talked about. If I decide to work with you, we will do this my way. One of them is 28 pages. So I may give that person, here's how I think this should be done. But as that servant leader, I'm keenly aware of that person's going to make decisions that I'm not aware of going on. I need them to also feel like that they can come to me and create an environment if they have an idea, to your point, creativity, if they have a gut feeling that something could be going wrong in their department or something else's, because they don't have to have it solidified. I really, from a creative perspective, I want to know gut feelings and sparks that somebody has if something doesn't feel right, that then maybe it's somebody else that has the solution for it. Well, that's most leaders, as the world defines them, don't walk in that way. Even the nicest leaders usually walk in, and people will say they're nice and go, well, I ask my people that work for me about their weekends, and I give them a bonus, and they've got great medical. But they're still very much the authoritative person. And a lot of times they think that they're making their decisions, and unless I slow them down and go, let's walk through just on a 15-person marketing agency. Let's walk through all the decisions that take place with the client account in 1 week. And we walk through it, and they're like, it dawns on them that instead of them thinking they were making 30% to 70% of the big decisions, they were making less than 1%, and all these other things were happening. That humbleness has to happen for somebody to go, oh, okay. And then if you slow it down, you go, well, if there's all these things that are going on, but people are hiding it from you because they're scared, you're not either part of the solution, you're definitely not part of the creativity for it, and nobody's coming to you with ideas.
That's so true. Now, you made a lot of reference to servant leadership in your response, and that is something that really attracted me to you when I saw you and when I met you. That really helped me bond with you. Can you tell me a bit about how you came up with, or how you stumbled upon the concept of servant leadership?
Yeah. I stumbled upon it actually as part of a faith journey that I have, although that's not why I implement it in business now. I kind of came to this spiritual place where I realized how I was treating people. I wasn't just the authoritative boss. I was the asshole boss. I walked in and would have said, if one person was crying on the team, that was you. If the whole team was crying, I dialed it up just a little bit too much, and I needed to come back 1 or 2 notches on from the stress perspective, because I was pushing people. And that was kind of how I came to it, from faith. But now I've implemented it in so many dozens of companies, and some I've invested in, and some I've been in full time. And I've come to this thing from servant leadership that says, look, my job is to serve other people in there. And I do differentiate, like, a lot of times people push back on servant leadership because they think it's only a religious thing. And I mean, it came from a gentleman who was an evangelical Christian who wrote a book in the 70s from it. But it's like, I almost started a leadership development company with a dear friend of mine who's a devout Muslim. He's one of the strongest servant leaders I ever met in my life from it. I would give MK my checkbook and walk out of the country if I felt somebody would take care of my family. He would be one of those people. So it's not tied to a religion to me. It is just that ethos of, like, really, do I believe that I have the knowledge to make all of the decisions, the lion's share, and be involved in those? And if I don't have that bandwidth really quickly, my only option is to serve the people and train you so that you can be better enabled at making those decisions. And that's just literally how I approach work at this point. So after I hire people, I almost become a mentor and coach to all of them, because I want their parts of the business running as well as they possibly can, like a factory, and have people that are running that. And they can tell me if a machine needs fixing, and maybe there's things like Trello or Asana that will tell that, because I want to go off with another small group of people in the company and mad scientist something that I don't know if it's going to work, but it takes your skill set and my skill set to figure out. And once we start to work on it, it's a great way for training people. We can then go take it into the bigger company and scale it there.
Okay, so now my next question is, can a leader succeed without creativity?
They can. They can't do as well without creativity, in my opinion. I mean, especially in the short term, there's nothing wrong, I don't think, with the hard driving, make all the decisions, do it exactly my way. I think it's better to not run a company that way, but companies do succeed at it. They don't succeed, but it's even with those that do succeed, it's more costly, even over like this 2 or 3 year time frame. Like, from a servant leadership perspective, I slow down and go, hey, if somebody is going through Even if I was running a factory or running a 30-person plumbing company, what comes up in people's personal lives that could affect work? Divorces, elder care, kid, cancer for them or a spouse. Well, one of the most productive people that I've ever worked with is a product manager that got thrown into elder care. That happens so often with people. Well, was he less productive than he had been before for probably 2 to 4 months? Yeah, he was probably like 40% capacity, maybe 60% capacity. But still, if I looked at the year, especially if I looked at the 18 months that, around that, he was still one of the best employees I've ever had. So the authoritative leader tends to say, well, their productivity dropped out the door. I'm just coming in as a servant leader and say, I'm not trying to make money this quarter with my company. I want to make quarter this year. I want to win championship after championship of sports. I want to have 10 years of just succeeding. So as a servant, my job is to say, I want my people to come to me and tell me when those things come up. Then we can discuss, does it make sense? Some cases, there's short-term disability. Some cases, maybe we find another job. But in most cases, when there's that open transparency, yeah, is there a dip? My job is to serve them because I want them, in this case, this guy, I wanted him to accomplish my goals over 2 years and 3 years, which he did. The fact that he wasn't so productive for a couple of months, so be it.
Wow. Now, so what's the concept of problem solving in leadership? How does a leader become a problem solver?
They first have to know what the problems are.
Okay, because most leaders, in my opinion, don't even have this awareness or consciousness that actually they are either elected, selected, appointed, or anointed to solve a problem. They just feel they are there to occupy an office or hold a title or sign some paperwork or lead some meetings. They don't have this awareness. So that's why I'm asking you that question.
Oh, I would agree with you. I worked at one public company that, because of both my role and my relationship throughout the company, even though I was not a C-level executive at this public company, executives were at a completely different part of the building that everybody called the God Pod, because only like the C-level, their assistants, and me and my boss had access to that. Nobody else could get in there without being buzzed in. Like, that's not to your point. Like, they were not part of the business. They weren't part of problem solving, really. They weren't even really managers from that. I think the deeper thing is, to your question is, like, leaders have to know what they don't know. When I come into companies and I'm either full-time or I'm coaching an executive or a leader, very quickly they're going to start to uncover the things that they might be wrong about. And so I have an exercise for me. It's like, you don't even know that you need to solve problems. You may not know there's something going on in payroll until somebody brings it up. So I literally have a little exercise every day where I ask myself, what are the 3 things I'm fundamentally wrong about in my business today? And then in the company I'm working with, that question will come up in team meetings, and it will come up on some one-on-ones, both what might I be wrong about, what might you be wrong about, but also like gut feelings, like you mentioned, like those can come up as well. But that process of going through and saying, if you're the CEO of a company, I don't care if it's a $200 million a year reoccurring revenue business, you're wrong about 3 things in your business right now, and you don't know it. And not only do you not know it, these are 3 things at least that you believe you're right about. And from a leadership perspective, I can walk anybody through it. It's like, we've all been part of companies. We've all been part of our personal lives where we've been doing something for a year, 2 years, 3 years. And only then when data comes out, do we realize not just was it like, hey, was it a creative decision or no, we had a strategy or a go-to-market plan. And if we go back now, this was the fundamentally wrong decision to have made. I was with a company, we ended up selling to Oracle. We thought we needed to create these satellite offices to go serve our customers where they were, as opposed to, scheduling meetings and showing up on time and onboarding. We ended up about 9 months into rolling out that plan and having hired about 30 to 35 people, realizing in a board meeting it was wrong. Customers didn't like it. It was wasting money. It was actually hurting our customer relationships for a variety of reasons, and that we were going to have to go through and fire 30 to 35 people unless we had other roles from the company. That was something that every member of the board knew it was the right decision at the time. As it played out, we realized, nope, it felt right, because you make a decision thinking it's the right decision, and until the data comes out, that feeling's still going to tell that. So as a leader, to be able to first start going through that and say, there are problems we know about, there are problems that get raised to us or could get raised to us if we create a different environment. And then there's a process where you have to just like cultivate these in your own mind or from your team to find out, is there a problem to solve, and realize you don't have to solve them. Ideally, you shouldn't solve them. My goal as a leader is to train my people so that I may facilitate conversation, but I want to make personally as few decisions as possible. Like, it could be your idea, it could be my idea. We may have very different ideas, but as we work through it, we should be able to your point, influence and convince the other person, this is the choice we're going to make. That's not a decision that I would make. That I made. That's a decision we made because we talked through it and we convinced each other. All right, my decision wasn't as good as I thought. Your decision is better. We'll walk through that. And most leaders do not take that approach.
So, how does a leader develop these, creative abilities, and how do they even identify creativity in people, right? Because we have established that the primary goal of a leader is to actually raise leaders to becoming creative problem solvers. So, as a leader, how can one help his followers become creative people, become problem solvers?
The first thing is to tell your team repeatedly that you might be wrong about things. Even when you're giving direction, like you point out, you tell them you may be wrong on things. And then the hard thing most leaders don't want to hear, and the hardest thing to implement, is you need to come back to them at least on a monthly basis, but either with past stories or especially current stories of things where you have been wrong. That could be something wrong on a business decision. It could be wrong on something on a relationship decision. Because by doing that, what happens is I find as a leader, I can tell my team anything that I want, but it's much like raising kids. They're going to look at my actions. So if I tell people, come to me with your problem, if I tell you that I might be wrong, well, we've all had a toxic boss we've worked with before. If instead I tell you that and I show up and I say, hey, look, Alan and I have been having difficulties going on. It was a gentleman that worked for me a couple of companies ago, and I didn't practice what I preach. I believe in healthy conflict. And it was months after we were having unhealthy conflict, and other people were witnessing this spring up. And he'd actually tried to solve it a couple times, but not as directly. And it was my job to actually have been the one to acknowledge it and bring it forward. And so I realized that months later. When I realized it, I did go to him. We solved our problem. At our next all-company meeting, I after asking for permission from him, I told the story to everybody. I said, look, I tell you people that I want healthy conflict. I want you to come up with problems. For the last 2 or 3 months, this is what's been going on with me and Alan. And I was like, there's at least 3 people in the call, and I called them out by name. I said, look, you saw this happen in this meeting, That was because of my stress level, because I didn't bring things up we should have been talking about. After that meeting, 3 people in the company reached out to me. And it wasn't the people that I called out to say, hey, one had a problem with a product they just didn't know how to bring up. The other were relationship issues in the company. So I could argue that's those are problems in the company, and they just hadn't surfaced them. And it was the transparency of me coming out and pointing out that I hadn't got this right that created that environment where they felt safe enough, no matter how many times I'd said it, to come forward. So that's one. Those are 2 of the things. And the third thing I would say is, I know so many people don't like personality assessments. And I have something called, there's a personality or a communication assessment called the Berkman assessment. Everybody should take it. You have a consultant come in and work it through. I literally keep mine on my table. Still from past companies. I've done this now at 3 companies as well. I have this woman named Julie who's a consultant here in Atlanta. All she does is do this as part of new onboarding. Do I agree with everything this says about who Kurt is? No. But what this does is this gives you and me common terminology to talk about how we show up relationship-wise or problems, what our stress levels might be. And so when everybody gets to see everybody's report. And this right here is that common language. If you speak Spanish and I speak English, sorry, that's not going to work very well. So this gives terminology for us to be able to bring up those conversations, whether they're purely creative or innovative, or if they're how do we bring up problems or stress, or hey, we're trying to talk through an engineering and UX issue. That gives them common terminology when there's friction, and there's always going to be friction. That's a huge there are other assessments that are good. That's just the one I choose to use.
Yeah, that's great. Now we've spoken about leadership on the business level. Can we come down to like a personal level? Because I believe that there are levels in leadership where even if you're not responsible for a huge team or a huge company or a huge revenue or a sales team or something like that, you're responsible for yourself. You're responsible to lead yourself. You're responsible for your family. You're responsible for people in your immediate circle. And that's one of the ways I like to always look at leadership, because the average person walking on the street or even riding their cars and listening to us right now may just be people who have not gotten to that point in their journey of leadership. So for someone in that level, in the personal level, how can that person grow in leadership with creativity?
Yeah, your point about leading yourself well, I completely agree with that. There's intentionality behind it. And I mean, I sincerely believe you influence people regardless of the level that you are in a company. And so by leading yourself, but acknowledging the influence that you have, you could be in a company of 100,000 people and you could be the front desk person. You're still having an interaction with people. And so when you acknowledge that how you influence people and interact, well, you might not have somebody that reports to you. Heck, you may be the lowest person on the poll, but you do still impact other people's daily lives and what happens in their company. And so for that, I think it's very helpful for growing as a leader to acknowledge that. To your point about family, I influence my kids way more from an influence perspective, leading them, than I do telling them what to do. I mean, my son is almost going to turn 5, so I mean, I'm still new at the game, but it's like I can tell him how to do something, or I can show him how to do something. He always follows my actions. It's like a little mirror or window into my soul when I go, ooh, that's something I struggle with when I see it, come out from him. So that's a little bit of it. The other part, and when you become the CEO, the CMO, the chief product officer, if you're a servant leader, you're going to learn very quickly that you follow much more than what a traditional leader would be. That's also how you coach people. And so how do you get good at following? You become a good follower. One of the reasons I was able to grow so fast in my career was I was told by mentors and coaches, you're a good mentee. And so I had mentees. I had then later I had paid professional coaches for me, and they would come back, they're like, you're one of the best people I've ever coached. And so even though if I'm paying somebody to be my coach, and I have a coach right now, I'm yielding to their authority. Well, to be a good follower, what do I need to do if you're my coach? Well, same thing as if I'm the front office desk person. I need to come to you with problems that I have. I need to come to you with reports of what I've done. When you tell me things to do, I need to know your personality and know how to respond. One of my last bosses, incredible boss, one-on-one, I could confront him as harshly and with any wording you could possibly use, and he would take it one-on-one. You could curse at him. I mean, that wasn't not my style, but that was fine one-on-one. And you could tell him he was stupid. It was the worst idea you've ever heard. He would take it, roll with it. He could handle it well. If you push back, though, the most minor little thing in front of others, it was triggering for him. And it was not going to go well for you or anybody else that was on that call or in the room. Well, I learned that about him very quickly. He didn't actually realize about himself. So I came to him and I was like, hey, I've noticed this. Like on one-on-one, this is how it works. And it's almost like being the head. And it would even be like, some cases when there's 3 people in the room, if we had one other like peer of mine, it would be okay. But if it wasn't that other person he felt safe with, and I was like, this is what happens if I push back at all. And he had to think about it. And he was like, yep. And so he acknowledged it then, and he came back to me a couple days later after he thought about it more. And I didn't even ask him to. And he was like, I've been thinking about that. Like, that's been a lot of my past career. So I was reading my boss, because my job as the employee is to make the company successful through my boss. Not make me successful, but make the company successful through my boss. He or she takes all my credit, so be it. Well, you practice that anywhere in your career journey. You're always going to have somebody you're reporting to. I mean, most people don't realize this from the outside until they become a CEO. Most CEOs, if they have investors, if they're a public company, they've got a board. If they're a venture-backed or private equity company, the moment they took their first investment check, they got a boss that had a time frame that the CEO might not be in control of at that point. So guess what? They have to be a follower as well. So practice being a good follower.
Yeah. And I think we've done justice to the aspect of leading with creativity. But how about creating with leadership? Because I believe that it's a two-sided coin. You lead with creativity, and then you create with leadership. I believe that the call to being creative is a call to leadership, right? So what do you have to say to people who have this novel idea, or who have just an idea, a brainchild, that they want to give expression in their world? Do you think these people should also hone in on their leadership skills, or they should just run up with their ideas and try to make $1 million out of it?
It depends on like what the product kind of is. If they have an idea for a book, podcast, YouTube kind of channels, TikTok, just start. You need to put in the reps. Like, you can sketch out things, but at the end of the day, like, your 100th video, your 100th article is going to be so much better. Like, I look back from a keynote speaking perspective, my first 20 paid keynotes, if I could have gone back, and I didn't keep good records, after my like 60th one, I should have gone back and refunded the first 20 people that paid me money. That's how much I improved from them. Well, I never would have got to my 60th one if I hadn't done those first 10, the first 20.
Yeah.
And so, and if it's things like that, you do just have to kind of get started, I feel like. If it's something where you're going to have other people help with it, well, that's where you may need to slow down, I think, and start thinking about it from a leadership perspective. And so, let's from a creativity perspective, I see so often non-engineering talent have an idea for something that they need a software engineer, and they don't fully value, because they have the idea, they have the creativity, they can see it in their mind. They don't value why they should give 50% of their company to, say, a software engineer to take their time. On the other side, I have all these friends that are software engineers and are super skilled, and they don't understand the creativity and all the work and skill that goes into a go-to-market plan and writing books and podcasts. And they don't like, I would never give 50% to some marketing and salesperson to lead that part of the company. This is my idea. Well, so like that, at that point, I think people really have to go back, and part of leading is, if you want this thing to come up, you need to have a real evaluation that says, what does it take to do this? And if you're too biased to be able to do that well, either pay somebody cash or give somebody equity in the company to just walk along with the side of you. I'm doing that with the founder right now. I literally have equity in the company just to guide him through who he's hiring, the type of investors to take money from. He was wise enough to realize there's a lot of areas of this wonderful, like, it could seriously be a multi-billion-dollar idea. And he was wise enough to say, I'm weak in these areas. And this one investor said, I need to get advice from you before they'll even consider talking to me. That was starting our conversation. That's a humble heart that I love. And it's like, he has a huge idea that will take lots of people to implement it over time. So to be creative and see that throughout, he also hasn't thought through everything enough. He realizes, he's like, you can help me with that. That's valuable.
Yeah, the reason I asked that question is because there are many creatives, there are many great inventors who they hit an idea and the idea turns out to be a success and it just goes viral. It turns into a phenomenon. And because of the momentum and the the growth that they experience, the speedy growth they experience, they don't even have time to, develop the leadership that they need, and they probably would outsource all of that, forgetting that they are still the brand and they need to lead the brand. And that's something that I admire Steve Jobs about. Even though he was a great inventor, he had that ability to command, the people with his vision, with his imagination, with his communication, right? Such that even when they edged him out from the company, they knew they needed to get him back because he was the brain box behind the company. And that was because he had creativity and he had leadership. So having said that, do you have any words that you would like to put out there for people who are in a point in their life where they want to work on their creativity, their leaders, and they feel like, well, maybe they should start thinking about getting more creative and helping their followers or their team or their members or their colleagues become more creative? Do you have any final words that you'd like to leave out for them?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of mind mapping, and I it's amazing how many people, as I start talking about just like creating a mind map, whether it's on paper or so many of the tools now, and they push back on it, and I don't actually understand why. But for me, I mean, in any role, I mean, like you could take a CPA, an accountant, and there are things like if all they're doing is personal taxes, like there's a huge benefit of just putting in the reps of having a mind map to talk for them to work through. Here's how they engage with their clients. Here's how relationships work. Are there other ways they can make money? If they're working for a firm, so and working through that process. And I think it's from a creativity perspective, I think one of the reasons people push back on like doing mind maps is it's the blank canvas issue. Having somebody who's never, I'm really creative in a lot of ways. I've invented literally dozens of things across many industries. I almost always start with something that's already out there. I'm wonderful in Photoshop, but if you give me a blank screen, I can't do it. I'm going to go find 5 things and go, I like this, I like that. Here's the color scheme I like over there. And then that gives me enough to massage into something. But I know that about my creativity because I forced myself to realize I will just sit at a blank screen for so long. So when I started writing, because I knew that for me visually, and a mentor had to walk me through that as well. Because he's like, you've invented these things. What's wrong? When I just say, give me an idea about this. And I would sit there and just stare at him. So when I started writing, I knew right at the beginning, it would take me so long to think through my ideas. Or, hey, if I have a long idea, if I want to write a guide on servant leadership, or what we're talking about today, the best thing that I can do is to not think and just either use a mind map or just open up a Google Doc and just dump as much stuff as I can in nothing whatsoever so that it's on the screen. And then I have some clay I can play with. And then actually in that case, there are groups that can help you with this. There are books like that you've written that'll help guide people through. You can do a lot of this with ChatGPT right now too. And so if it's scary to talk to somebody else and you want to be creative on something, one of the reasons I'm so good using ChatGPT is when I give it stuff, before I ask it something, I've gotten in the habit of saying, what else have I not given you that would be helpful to accomplish my goal? And there has never been a time, actually I shouldn't say once, and it was very recently, did I finally ask it that question. And it was like, nope, I think I'm good. Let's go. But I mean, every other time, it asked me, and I'll ask it that repeatedly, it asked me for other information on something I think I'm the expert on that I haven't given enough information or I haven't covered in some way. And I'm like, huh. And so that's actually been really good, actually talking to the robot. It's helped me start asking other people more questions. And I have a friend here in town named Ashish. Ashish is one of the best questioners I've ever met. Everybody becomes instantly a friend because he wants to ask you all these questions. And I tried mimicking it and it's effort for me. ChatGPT has made it a lot easier for me, and I think because I didn't have the issues of trying to deal with a person a little while.
Wow, thank you so much. I think we've been able to do justice to this conversation today, and this will be a good point where we can call it for this episode. Thank you so much, Kurt, for obliging my request to be on the show today. And to our listeners out there, I believe you found some value in today's conversation. If you found this conversation impactful and valuable, why don't you talk to your friend, share it with someone, your coworker, a colleague, a loved one, and let them know that they can actually lead with creativity and they can create with leadership. Thank you once again for joining us in today's episode. See you next week for another run and another episode of Creativity Boost. Till then, have a great day. Bye-bye.